Nicola Sturgeon announced today she's stepping away from politics for good. She resigned, of course, as Scottish First Minister in 2023, but today said she wouldn't contest next year's election as a member of the Scottish Parliament. So, what was her legacy? Among many failures, it was under Sturgeon's watch that a trans rapist, a biological man, was sent to serve time in a female prison.
Trans women are women, but in the prison context, there is no automatic right for a trans woman.
So there are contexts where a trans woman is not a woman?
No, there is circumstances in which a trans woman will be housed in the male prison estate.
Self-confessed feminist Miss Sturgeon could also never bring herself to call the trans rapist Isla Bryson a man. In fact, in an insult to women everywhere, she did the opposite.
There is no such procedure in the current law for somebody getting a gender recognition certificate. My comments about her, the person being a rapist is in context of what should happen to them within the prison service. This is
Thank you, First Minister. I think you just referred to Isla Bryson using the word her. Does that mean you do, in fact, think she is a woman?
Anything into...
And seemingly fixated with LGBT issues, Sturgeon then died on the hill of her insane gender recognition bill, which would have seen victims of sexual assault in Scotland forced in court to refer to their trans attackers by their preferred pronouns.
I'm a feminist. I will argue for women's rights. I will do everything I can to protect women's rights for as long as I live.
Well, the UK government saw sense and blocked the bill, and the SNP finally gave up its appeal last year. But then there was the SNP finances scandal, for which her estranged husband was charged and Nicola Sturgeon was arrested. £600,000 of party funds given by donors that allegedly disappeared or was spent on other things. She's still under police investigation for that, and both Sturgeon and her estranged husband deny the allegations. Some have praised Nicola Sturgeon for her performance during COVID, for example, though I remember her as an authoritarian who demanded everyone follow silly rules in a bid to outdo Boris Johnson in Westminster.
I can't make this point strongly enough. These rules should not be seen as optional. They are absolutely vital. In many respects, they are the most important part of that first line of defence, all of us, that I keep talking about.
So what did she do after boasting about following the rules?
Before I go any further today, I want to take this opportunity to say how sorry I am for my breach of rules that I ask all of us to follow every single day. I took my face mask off while briefly attending a funeral party last week. I'm sure everyone will have seen in the media this morning a picture of me without it. I was in the wrong.
Yeah, she broke the rules, didn't she? Twice. And then loads of WhatsApp messages critical to the COVID inquiry were then reportedly deleted from her phone. How mysterious. But beyond all the scandals was the failure of Nicola Sturgeon to achieve her most basic goals. Scottish education standards completely collapsed on her watch, and the poverty-related attainment gap, which she promised to eradicate, widened. Scotland is still the drug deaths capital of Europe. The Scottish NHS is still on its knees, and she was even accused of diverting £7 billion of funds for the NHS to other Scottish projects, all while raising taxes on hard-working Scots. Former leader of the SNP, Humza Yousaf, remember him?
The Lord President, white. The Lord Justice Clerk, white. Every High Court judge, white. The Lord Advocate, white.
Well, he said today, I'm excited to see what Nicola goes on to do next. She is one of the most talented politicians of our generation. I'm not sure how much weight that has coming from him. Anyway, finally, Nicola Sturgeon spent half her time throwing nasty accusations around against Conservative politicians. The irony was completely lost on her that perhaps the truth was that actually she wasn't that kind herself.
I detest the Tories and everything they stand for. Just as they're transphobic, you will also find that they're deeply misogynist, often homophobic, possibly some of them racist as well.
You're a fascist, you are a racist, and the south side of Glasgow will reject.
Sense of corruption at the heart of the Westminster system, and that has to be rooted out. That Boris Johnson has so clearly lost the confidence of the UK. It is just, I think, an unsustainable proposition. I detest the Tories and everything they stand for.
OK, let's get the thoughts of my panel now. Director of Popular Conservatives, Mark Littlewood, businessman and activist Adam Brooks, and the journalist and broadcaster Zoe Grunewald. Good evening, panel. welcome along. Zoe, let's start with you ladies first. Nicola Sturgeon, what's her legacy?
Well, I think it's quite mixed. I think that's fair to say. I mean, I think you have to give credit where credit's due. I think she had a really interesting political journey. You know, she had a pretty humble upbringing. She was the first female First Minister. She was a long-serving office holder, almost was in the position for a decade. She had several good, I think, progressive policies: free university tuition, the baby box scheme, expanded childcare provision. She raised Scotland's profile on the world stage. She's still seen as a widely respected politician amongst many people in Scotland. That being said, there clearly were issues. There's still an educational attainment gap in Scotland. As you say, it's got one of the highest drug-related deaths statistics in Europe. And of course, NHS performance is bleak. So, the independence question isn't settled. The SNP is split. And that's even before you go to all the finance issues that surrounded the party as well.
Well, yeah, we've not even mentioned the independence issue, which I think, Adam, she has cemented as being, well, I reckon at least 100 years before that question ever comes around again. She killed it off.
Yeah. Despite,
by the way, banging on about a second Indie ref for years and years and years, which was never going to happen.
She divided Scotland massively. But when she first resigned, many commentators, media figures, MPs, sort of fawning all over her like she was some great leader. She failed on nearly everything that she promised to do.
You must agree, though, she did a great job during COVID, Adam.
Look, she was so authoritarian, and they had such harsh restrictions in Scotland. I remember, she tried to outdo, as you said, Boris.
Bonkers.
All the time.
Bonkers.
But their COVID stats, I was quite big on the stats during COVID. Hospitalisations, COVID cases were worse than ours. So she did it all in vain. She just punished the Scottish people, But again, she failed in the NHS. She failed on education. She failed on drugs. Scotland became the drugs capital of Europe under her tenure. She introduced the mad self-identification rule that trampled all over women's rights. Trans women are not women.
You don't think she's a feminist then? Because she calls herself a feminist.
I don't know what she is, because anyone that believes that men can suddenly become women, for me, need their heads checked.
OK.
And, she's meant to be an intelligent woman.
And Mark, she loved having a pop at your lot, the Tories. We showed that last montage there. She was pretty vicious at times.
She's performed a wonderful public service, because she has exposed exactly what an independent Scotland would look like. I'm rather with you, Ben, that I think now it's 100 years before this question is reinvestigated. I mean, it might happen any time. If the Scottish people wish to leave the Union, I believe they're entitled to. But you've had a glimpse of it now. The sort of government you would be under is the Sturgeon government. Do you want that? I'm very confident if you ran a referendum every 5 years for the next 100 years, thanks to Nicola Sturgeon, the Scots will vote to stay in the Union. That's her legacy.
So, Zoe, you mentioned that that she would have gone on to do other things beyond politics. There was a conjecture maybe she would have liked to have been a human rights ambassador somewhere. But I think, from what we understand, she's not going anywhere. She's just kind of scuttling off with her tail between her legs. What was the death knell for her?
Yeah, I think this is a real indication of how quickly things seem to unravel for her towards the end. There was all the stuff around the finances and the financing of the SNP. There was obviously her husband being arrested and charged. And I think that was a real, problem for her. It was incredibly embarrassing. We all remember the footage of the police cars outside the home and everything.
They both deny those allegations, of course, and the case is still ongoing, so we can't delve too much into it. But what about the gender bill? I mean, for me, that was pretty pivotal. I mean,
personally, look, I support transgender people. I think that the gender recognition bill is important. But I think...
Sorry to keep interrupting you.
Yeah.
Just before you go on there, do you think Isla Bryson, the case in Scotland, should have ended up in a women's prison?
I think that showed exactly why this is such a complicated issue that deserves real, proper scrutiny and people to look at it carefully, because that was, I think, a mistake. I mean, when you're looking at women's safety, I don't think she should have ended up in that prison. Well, I'm going to respect people's pronouns. I believe in transgender people.
I'm not when he's a rapist.
Let's not fall out over... Okay.
I know, and there's pictures of him in tight leggings with his bulge in your face.
Okay.
Zoe, what's your sentencing suggestion to the Scotland?
Look, I'm not a legal expert. I don't have...
You need to be a legal expert. It's a moral question. It's not a legal question.
Well,
Do you think biological men who identify as women should go to women's prisons? That's the political decision. You don't need to be
I actually do, but I think if somebody is a threat to women's safety, women should be protected. That would be the same if it was a cisgender woman as well.
Women should go to women's prisons.
Yes, I do. Yeah, wow. I believe transgender women should be treated.
Do you agree that's a political decision, not a judicial one?
I mean, probably yes. I don't really know. I'm not entirely clear on the distinction.
Political parties can fight about that at the ballot box. It's not illegal.
Can I just say, I also understand completely why people have concerns about this. I want to make that very clear.
I've got two daughters. I've got massive concerns.
And I'm a woman. You know, I'm a feminist. I have feared for my safety in the past.
Every man would choose a woman's prison.
Well, I think predatory men find ways to attack women without going into prison.
But every man who's convicted will choose.
But this is why I think women's safety should be looked at in the round. I think if anyone is going into any prison and is a threat to another prisoner, that should be taken into account.
Trans men should not go into women's prisons.
But not all you mean trans women?
Trans women.
Trans women.
Not all trans women are a threat to cis women.
Not all men are a threat to women.
95% plus of trans women still have a penis and their genitalia. This is the madness. As a father of two daughters, you know, I think it is absolutely crazy that people can think that men can put on a wig and a dress and suddenly identify as a woman.
In prison, especially.
It's mental.
Okay. As the woman on the panel, I have feelings of what it is to be a woman. I know about women's safety. I know about feeling unsafe. I have never felt unsafe by trans women. I know trans women. I have trans female friends. I've never felt unsafe. I have felt unsafe as a result of cis men.
Even we've got Michelle Dewberry, who is a presenter on this channel, has just had to leave her gym and cancel her membership because she tried to get changed in a changing room and a man that identifies as a woman was getting changed.
That's her decision. I wouldn't feel that way. I would not feel that way. But that's her decision.
So, do you think there should be any segregation at all?
Are we talking about Nicola Sturgeon or are we talking about Zoe's perspective on this?
Any segregation at all? Or do we just have prisons in which there'll be some men and some women?
Just to take this back to the topic, because this is, you know, just take this back on the topic, which is Nicola Sturgeon. I said, I do think that showed that there was a mishandling of the gender recognition bill here. It is clearly a very emotive issue. I understand the strong feelings on both sides. And I think clearly she undermined confidence in what I think is an important piece of legislation.
I think it was the gender recognition bill which really was her death knell, because after the UK government torpedoed it, I think that was just the
Isla Bryson case highlighted basically to the world the insanity of what she was doing.
I mean, we saw the clips in the introduction there. Even I don't think Nicola Sturgeon understood what her position was. I think she just thought she was doing the right thing by saying she, and, you know, trying to go along with the LGBT
I don't even
agenda.
like calling him Isla, but I can't remember his name.
It's not the pronouns, it's the safety that matters.
Yeah, OK, interesting. And what about, just sorry, briefly now, the SNP as we stand now, I mean, they've lost loads of seats compared to... One thing Nicola Sturgeon did do is win a lot of seats. She had electoral success. Now that's kind of disappearing. What do you make of Swinney?
I think, I think Swinney's done a fairly good job of holding the SNP together. I think there's a broader existential point for the SNP, which is that half of the SNP, or broadly, is quite progressive, quite young, and there's another half that is, I guess, a bit more conservative and are more kind of interested in the independence question. And I think trying to unite those two is going to be very difficult for the SNP in the future.
Yeah. OK, great. I always thought with the Indy question, it was so hypocritical. It's like you want to be independent and stay a part of rejoin the EU, where you'd have to adopt their currency, go by all their rules. You'd be in no sense independent whatsoever. Maybe Donald Trump, he's got golf courses in Aberdeen. He can make the 51st.
Reform is doing all right in Scotland as well, I think.
What's the polling like?
Ahead of the Tories.
Yeah, they're on the rise, yeah.
Oh, interesting. Right, panel, great start. Thank you very much.